All right, we are recording.
Okay. Well, I thought I would start with a grounding, just to get us all centered today. So, if you all just want to get comfortable, maybe put your feet flat on the floor, take a deep breath, close your eyes, and just exhale and just center in. Take another deep breath and exhale. And I want you to just ground yourself, feeling your roots from the bottoms of your feet going down, down, deep into Mother Earth. And as you do this, you become aware there is this wonderful green energy that is coming back up through the roots that is very healing and kind and soft and soothing. And it's coming back and filling you up from the bottoms of your feet all the way to the top of your head. And just feel that energy just coursing through you, filling you, easing any aches and pains, helping with any discomfort that you're having, just soothing you. And you notice that it's pooling in your heart space and it's just filling that space. And as it does, it begins to move outward and into the group. And it begins to connect us all, surrounding us all in this beautiful bubble of green, soothing, healing energy. And this energy will surround us during our time together. Will also soothe and surround anyone who joins us later, and will stay with us during this time. Just take a deep breath and exhale, and know that we are all connected, we are all safe, grounded, protected. And when this group ends, the energy will dissipate and you will be able to take what works for you and leave the rest. Take another deep breath, exhale, and open your eyes and be back with us.
Thank you, Lori. So we're going to start today. I'm going to start. I want to make it clear that I am not a professional. I'm not a mental health professional, and I'm not a pro at boundaries. But I do read a lot of articles and advice and um, thoughts by people who are amazing with boundaries, and I'm going to be sharing some of those resources. For example, Natalie Liu at the Baggage Reclaim has a podcast and an Instagram page and a blog that are incredibly helpful. And I'll be referring to her a little bit too. Um, what I'd like to do is I'm going to talk for about 15 minutes, just sharing some of the best things I've found about boundaries and what boundaries sound like and how to set boundaries, like a step by step. And then if we have time, I have more to share, and then Lori is going to share about spiritual boundaries and how to set them. I'm going to do the interpersonal and she'll do the spiritual. And then we'll take questions and see where this goes. I wanted to start by reading. In the mornings, I flip through Pinterest for inspiration. And this morning, and I follow some people that do like daily, like almost horoscope type things. And for May 16th today, this says, the angels are saying to you today, setting boundaries and limitations is necessary. Choose who and what you allow into your life and to share your space and energy. It's important to know what's right for you and what isn't. Don't be drawn into any negative situations. Life is tough enough without that. I thought that was hilarious because these things never talk about boundaries. And so like that's an awesome synchronicity to be like, yes, here we are talking about boundaries. So what are boundaries? The definition is a point or limit that indicates where two things become different. unofficial rules about what should not be done, limits that define acceptable behavior, who and what you allow into your life. Boundaries can be how you know where you end and another person begins. And there's all kinds of boundaries. There's boundaries you have with others. There are boundaries that you set in relationships or that you set for groups. Like in Awkwardly Zen, we have the boundary that everybody is muted unless they're talking. That creates an atmosphere where we're not getting pingbacks and stuff like that. And everybody understands that and adheres to the boundaries, right? There's boundaries you set for yourself, what you will and won't allow yourself to experience or do. There's firm boundaries that we hold, like do not steal. And then there's flexible boundaries we hold, like don't stay up past 11. You know, sometimes you're gonna. So some boundaries are like, this is my boundary and it's an unbreakable. And some we have flexibility with. And we'll consider the consequences of when our boundaries are pushed or violated. And the consequences can vary from like there's going to be a discussion or maybe an argument to this relationship will end if this behavior continues. So like there's a whole wide realm of how we handle when boundaries aren't respected. Without healthy boundaries, it's easy to be used and manipulated. I know that I did not have healthy boundaries when I was married, and either I was married twice, and I never said that's not okay with me. Like I was so conflict avoidant that I just let things slide and just tried to like stay in the love, right? And when you don't have boundaries like that, when I didn't have boundaries like that, it's actually a poison to the relationship. So boundaries are important to be able to have intimacy and closeness with people because people need to know when something's not okay with you, right? And people need to know what you really want. It can be easy to fall into the traps of codependency, where you take responsibility, for example, for the feelings and actions that aren't your responsibility. And this is where Nat Liu, that I mentioned before in the baggage reclaim, she talks about people pleasing, perfectionism, overthinking, overgiving, and over responsibility. And those are probably things that a lot of us can relate to. I know that I relate to all of them. Like I think way too much. I I take way too much responsibility for how other people are feeling rather than allowing them to have their feelings. So I've had to learn over the years to let people deal with their own feelings. It's not my job. My job is to take care of me and just express my own authentic self, to express my own needs and feelings, and to allow other people to be real with me. And like one thing I can tell you is that like I embrace awkward, which is awkward for some people and not okay with some people. Some people do not want to embrace awkward. So I have to be aware of boundaries, of not violating their boundaries about how comfortable they are with my propensity to bring up topics that they might not be comfortable with, right? So it's like boundaries help us to negotiate our relationships in a way where there's consent all around. No, the word no protects your boundaries, what you do and do not want to allow into your life. No is the border guard that you control. And an important thing about no is that it's a complete sentence. We don't have to explain why we have no. We don't have to justify it. Right? You get to say no when you don't want to do something, or you don't want someone or something to be a part of your experience. Like a lot of us are way too quote unquote nice. We don't want to say no. We like fudge around. We make excuses. We feel like we're going to hurt somebody's feelings if we're honest. that we don't really want to go to their party, or, you know, and it's so important that we learn to be able to express what is true for us. How many of you have ever said yes when you really wanted to say no? Yeah. In any area, whether it's to go to a party or to do a favor for somebody, to receive a hug, or to request a request for your time or your money, attention, etc., right? It's very often difficult for us to say no. And sit with that feeling, like notice how that feels not to be able to feel obligated to say yes to people, right? And then like how would you, if you were holding yourself sacred and choosing to protect your own boundaries, like what would that feel like instead? And how would that create authenticity in your relationships? Just something to think about. When we say yes, even though our preference would be to say no, that indicates a lack of healthy boundaries. Healthy boundaries are not something that many of us have been taught. On the contrary, we've been taught to be polite, to think of how the other person feels, to be of service. Right? A lot of us are very interested in being of service to other people, of helping other people. And that can make the boundaries murky if we're not really clear about how far we're willing to go to help other people. And we have to ask, what about our own feelings, needs, wants, and desires, right? We can't let those get pushed back. That's what the boundaries are necessary to help us protect our own needs. Sometimes we stand up for ourselves and our boundaries, and other people call us things like selfish, or self-centered, or antisocial, or greedy. None of those are true, of course. But it can make us hesitant to speak our boundaries and be true to ourselves. After all, most of us want to make a good impression and for people to like us and respect us. One of my first husband used to always tell me I was the sweetest person he ever met. And that was a very controlling thing because I didn't want to do anything. I never wanted to say no to him. I never wanted to give him any impression that I wasn't the sweetest person he'd ever known, right? So like being aware of the ways that people can manipulate us if we're not really clear on our boundaries. How much do we harm ourselves by not speaking our truths and living our authentic lives? Boundaries help us to protect what is important to us. We need to be important to us. Notice how you feel when you don't set or speak your truth or your boundaries. Like think back to a time when you've done something you didn't really want to do. And how does that feel? When you've agreed to bring cookies for your kids' third grade class, and you just don't have the time, and you don't know how you're gonna do it, right? Or whatever it is, you know, whenever you've said yes and you really didn't want to, how does that obligation feel? Okay. Or when you've said something's important to you, and then somebody just blows through your boundary or ignores it, like how does that feel? Anger can be a clue that perhaps a boundary's been violated. Like if you notice yourself getting angry about something, maybe take a pause and be like, is there a boundary that's being violated here? So here's some examples of what boundaries can sound like. This is from Lisa A. Romano. And I'll put it in now. I just put it through into the chat, my website and two of my websites, and then my Pinterest mental health page, where I have a lot of these resources. And this is one of the pins from that mental health page, and it's from Lisa A. Romano. Here's some of what boundaries sound like. It's not my responsibility to make sure others are responsible. Who's felt responsible for other people, whether they're doing the right thing or not? right? That is not our responsibility, even if it's our children, or even if it's our partner or our spouse or our family member. Okay, it's not our responsibility to make them responsible. It's not my job to rescue people from their drama. It's okay if others get angry. Who's comfortable with letting others get angry? Anybody? I am so not comfortable, but I'm working on it, because that has to be. If they get angry because I'm just being me, that isn't my responsibility. I'm learning that boundary. It's okay to say no. It's my job to make me happy and figure out what brings me joy. That's my job. It's not my job to think, feel, or live for others. No matter how much I want to help, quote unquote, help other people be happy, that's not my job. I can be there for them and I can love them, but it's not up to me to fix them. Nobody wants to be fixed. We all want to be respected. And it's a boundary violation when I go offering unsolicited advice. I really had to learn that, especially with my daughter. She does not want my advice, no matter how good it is. I have a right. Here's another, what boundaries sound like. I have a right to my feelings, no matter what anyone else feels about my feelings. I still get to feel the way I feel. You get to feel the way you feel. No one has to agree with me. That's a hard one. That's been a hard one for me, because like, I want to make people happy and I want them to agree with me. And like, if I say something, it's hard not to backpedal and like get to a point where they'll be okay with what I said. But for me to be on my authentic self and for me to be happy, I really need to stay with what is true for me. And if that makes somebody upset, then they get to deal with their feelings however they need to. I have to hold my boundary for me. No one has a right to verbally abuse me, and that includes family, friends, partners, and coworkers. And these are all spelled out for you on that Pinterest page. So like, if you want to remember them, just scroll through those pins and you can see a bunch of these good ideas. It is okay to spend time alone without explaining myself. We have a right to meet our own needs without explaining to somebody. Like, somebody's like, you're not busy, you're not working, you're not doing anything, why aren't you spending time with me? Because I want to spend time with myself. And I don't have to explain that to anybody. Maybe I need an hour to look at the clouds. Maybe that's my sanity, right? I do not need permission to be who I am, think what I think, nor to honor me. I give myself permission. Those are boundaries. Other people have every right to not like me or to disagree with me, but they do not have the right to disrespect me. It's another boundary. I have a right to end draining conversations and relationships. And I know I am enough. So those were all from Lisa Romano. Real quickly, because my 15 minutes are up, I just want to do quick steps to setting boundaries. Like, how do you set boundaries? Just a few steps here. 1, allow yourself to feel what matters to you. Make a list and write it down. Situations will come up that you hadn't anticipated. So here's the next important step. 2, give yourself time to think about it and feel into it. So many times we feel in a rush to give an immediate answer. Somebody asks for a favor or asks us to do something, and we like feel like right there on the spot we have to make a split decision. No, you don't actually. You can make your immediate default answer, give me a moment to think about it, or something like that. Like, let me get back to you. Let me just check in with myself. Like, you can create that space for yourself, that boundary between you and the other person and their expectations, and just give yourself a little room to breathe so you can check in and see, is this what I want or not? Step 3, choose to be in integrity with yourself. Remember that if someone can't trust you to say no, then they can't be confident that your yes really means yes. Like if I ask, I'm going to hesitate to ask you for a favor if I think you'll say yes, if I think you don't know how to say no to me. If I think you'll say yes out of obligation, I'm not going to ask you because I don't want that. I want you to only do things for me that you want to do for me, right? Say no if that is what you want. Say yes if that is what you want. 4, remember that you can express your boundaries even if you say yes. So for example, your friend asks you to help them move. You do want to help, but you don't want to be there the whole day. You can say, I'd be happy to help from 3 to 5 in the afternoon. So you put parameters around your yes. That's a boundary, right? 5, you do not have to have an excuse to say no or to set your own limits or boundaries. This, I feel like, is the most important thing. Oh, I see it. Can you repeat one? Yes, I will. This is the most important thing, I think. You don't have to have an excuse to say no. You get to just say no. I don't want to. That might make the other person angry, but that is your boundary, and honor that. An example from the previous example, if your friend asks you if you have something going on at 5, like you've agreed to work from 3 to 5, you don't owe them an explanation. Maybe what you've got going on is nothing, or a bubble bath, or a much needed self-care break for yourself. You don't owe anyone any explanations. Number 1 was allow yourself to feel. What matters to you? Make a list, write it down. Yeah, when Laurie's talking, I will repost them all in the chat. Yeah. Or I Am Mountain Dreamer. I just posted this on the Awkwardly Zen website. No, I didn't. I couldn't get into Awkwardly Zen website. It was Mercury retrograde yesterday. It wasn't letting me in. I posted it on my Facebook. But in the invitation, she asks, or I Am Mountain Dreamer asks, I want to know if you can disappoint another to be true to yourself. I think that is so profound. Can you disappoint somebody else to be true to yourself? That's hard, right? And then one final thing from Terry Cole. At first, you will probably feel selfish, guilty, or embarrassed when you set a boundary. Anybody been there? I know I am. Do it anyway and tell yourself you have a right to self-care. Setting boundaries takes practice and determination. Don't let anxiety or low self-esteem prevent you from taking care of yourself. Okay, so now Laurie is going to talk to us about spiritual boundaries.
Okay. So in many ways, they're very similar. When we work with spirit, whether that's a guide, an angel, beings that want to speak with you, I think especially if you're doing some form of mediumship where it's deceased loved ones, friends that are wanting to get in touch, it's very important to have boundaries. When I first started opening up and receiving messages, I had many different kinds of energies trying to speak with me and trying to push their way in. And I was new and I didn't know what that meant. And I was trying to pay attention and listen to everything. And I started to discover that some of the energies started to feel really pushy and not very nice sometimes. I think there are sometimes energies that are not of the highest vibration, don't always have our best interest at heart, so to speak. And I had to learn fairly quickly that I needed to say no to them and say, this isn't allowed, and you can't come in and get my attention or speak to me. As I got to work, as I got to know my guide that I work with and worked with him more and more, I began to have a relationship with him in that I ask him now to be my gatekeeper, if you will. Someone called him my social secretary, but he's the energy that basically screens any other energy that's going to try to communicate with me and helps determine whether or not those energies are in my best interest. And if it's someone or something that I want or need to communicate with. early on, when I was just getting introduced to all of this and discovering that there were these non-physical beings that we could all communicate with, I read a book called Companions in Spirit. It's an old book, and for a long time, it was the book I went to. It was like my go-to for information on how to contact your guides, how to work with angels, how to just receive information. I'm not even sure that it's still in publication, but it might be on Amazon. So it's Companions in Spirit, and it's by a Leah Maggie Garfield and a Jake Grant, or I'm sorry, a Jack Grant are the two authors. And they have a section about setting boundaries with energies and with beings that want to speak with you. And one of the authors was talking about having an energy that kept trying to communicate with her. And what she discovered was it was uh, a family member that had died and was trying to basically manipulate her into doing something with their spouse that was still living, and she realized it wasn't the highest and best energy and wasn't wanting the highest and best good for the person that that this energy was wanting her to communicate with. So she did what she called on the cosmic cops, and she described these beings as light beings who basically help keep order. And if there's an energy that's bothering you, you can request one of these energies to come in and help escort this being away and help set that boundary with you and for you, and helps to teach that other energy, nope, you can't do that. They're kind, they're loving, they're not mean in any way. They're just these beings, though, um, that understand the boundaries and escort energies away that may be trying to interfere with us and not serve our highest good. It's also my understanding that spirit isn't really supposed to or allowed to interfere with us without our permission. And sometimes I think when we're first opening up, I know that was true for me when I was first opening up and wanting to talk with guides and angels and beings of light, I wasn't able to really discriminate who these energies were, what their intent was. And so I needed that protection from other energies that were of higher vibration that could help set those boundaries with me and for me sometimes, because I didn't always know. And as I've gotten better at discerning that and working with my guides and my angels, I've been able to have a better understanding of how to set those boundaries for myself. So I don't allow any energy into my environment that isn't of highest and best good and highest and best light. So what I will do is, let's say I'm going to do a reading with someone and they're coming to my home and we're going to sit down together and interact. I will ask Archangel Michael generally to stand at my doorway. And when that person arrives, I ask that the archangel take any energy that that person may be carrying, or if it has an attachment of some kind that is not of highest and best good, to please hold that energy at the door and let the person come in. We can sit together and do the work we need to do. And then at the end of our session, as they leave, if that person wants that energy back, then Archangel Michael will gladly hand it back to them and they will go on about their business. But that energy is not allowed in my immediate space. So that's a boundary that I set for myself with spirit. I also ask archangels to come and stand in the corners of the room that I'm working in, so that I also set that boundary of only the highest vibration possible, and to have just the highest light and energy from beings that are going to be working with us in that arena. So setting boundaries, I think, with spirit is very much the same as setting them with people. It's saying no. If someone is contacting you I've had loved ones pop in at kind of odd times in my life and want to tell me a story or have me get in touch with their loved one. And I say no. I will literally put up my hand and say, no, stop, and ask them to please step back and figure out with them or with my guides what's the most appropriate way for me to interact with this person, or do I need to even interact with this person? Is it appropriate for me or for them in this moment? So I say no at times. um, I've only just recently started um, doing a type of mediumship where I'm in touch with folks, family members or friends who've crossed over. And I've spent years basically setting a boundary and saying, no, I'm not going to do that. And I visualized it in my mind as sort of this rope, kind of like you would see at a theater that ropes off certain sections. And I would set that up and say, you can't come past this because I'm not ready to receive this information. I'm not ready to provide this information to others. So I've kept that boundary for a very long time. Now I'm learning how to open that boundary a bit and allow some of that energy to come through and share those messages when it's appropriate, and then putting the boundary back and saying, nope, you can't just bug me at any time, day or night. Another boundary that I've set for myself is I will talk to spirit. I love that interaction, and I don't want to see them. I don't want to wake up in the middle of the night and have this energy standing next to me in my bedroom, because that will scare me. And so my my rule is that you can talk to me all you want. I don't want to see you. So do not appear to me as an apparition of any kind. That doesn't mean that sometimes I don't catch a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye, but they know that the boundary is they can't just full on come and stand right in front of me unless I give them permission to do so. So setting those boundaries helps to protect us and also make sure that spirit is coming in with the highest and best of intentions. I do think there are energies out there in the spirit world that don't always have our best interest at heart. And it's protecting ourselves from those energies that I feel like is very important. Um, I know that I've heard other mediums talk about what they will do is they will literally say to the beings that they work with, okay, my office hours are, and they will say, my office hours are 9 to 4. You can contact me then, and I will endeavor to help you or communicate what you're trying to communicate. Otherwise, I'm off and you can't come through. I'm not going to listen. I'm not going to hear you. I'm not available. So they set those very clear boundaries so that they're not inundated constantly 24/7 with beings trying to talk to them and get a message to someone. I think what happens, especially for mediums, is that those beings are so excited when there is an open channel, when there's someone that can hear them, that can receive the messages and potentially get them to their loved ones that are still here on earth. Because I think they want to communicate and they want everyone to know that they're okay. But I think in their excitement and enthusiasm to be able to communicate with someone who's still living, gets overwhelming and they don't understand boundaries. It's like they don't have that sense of time and place and space the way we do here on earth, because now they're non-physical. And so everything just flows all the time. There is no time. So I think in those instances, we have to be very clear about setting those clear boundaries and specific time limits, which they will understand, and you set those up, and that's the only time you will interact with them. And again, I also use my guides and angels to help to insulate me, if you will, and to also stop those energies from trying to interfere or slip through, because they can't get past my guides if when I ask for their support. And generally, I always ask that I'm always protected by energy that I don't want to have interfere. So that's my part of this.
Thanks, Laurie.
Yeah.
I'm looking at some of the comments and questions in the chat, and I just want to read this one quote from Nidra Glover Tawab. She's a therapist, and it says, "Repeat after me. I am not responsible for how people respond to my boundaries. I'm responsible for setting and honoring my boundaries. If my relationships end because I set boundaries, it's a sign that the foundation was cracked. In healthy relationships, I can set boundaries without fear of retaliation, cutoffs, or manipulation." I want to repeat that last part again because I think it's so important. In healthy relationships, I can set boundaries without fear of retaliation, cutoffs, or manipulation. That pin is on my mental health board if anybody wants it. So let's look at what other questions we have.
There's one here about what about energy vampires in the spirit community, boundaries for them? Absolutely. It's just like any energy vampires, even in the physical world, you set very clear boundaries with them and you say, no, you are not allowed to be here and to do this. Personally, for something like that, I would definitely call in an archangel to help, your guides, to set those boundaries and to have them in place to prevent that energy, whatever it is, from even contacting you and coming into your space. If they continue, personally, I would probably call on what Maggie called the cosmic cops and ask them to please escort that energy away. Usually the archangels can do that, especially Michael. He's kind of my go-to angel for that. Can help escort that energy away and let them know in no uncertain terms that that won't be allowed, that without my permission, they cannot come into my space. And I certainly don't want my energy being taken by an energy, by some non-physical being that I'm not aware of or that I didn't invite into my environment. So that's how I would handle it. Any other ideas or experiences with that? I'm just curious.
I every night and often in the morning as well ask Archangel Michael to cut all ties that are not serving me. So I'm a big believer in that. And even if you have never worked with archangels, and even if it feels really weird, it doesn't hurt to say it. It doesn't hurt to think it. And it's been a huge benefit for me because it allows my brain to stop whirling at night, because I do all of those things that both you and Kat have talked about, of like, oh, how do I fix this? And what if I should have said this and I could have done this differently and all of that. And I have found since I do that with Archangel Michael, my brain slows down and I can almost feel his energy on my head of just go to bed. You're good.
Yes, I've had that same experience where my mind was just going a mile a minute and I was incredibly anxious, calling Archangel Michael, and immediately felt that calm come over me and just felt that peacefulness that, yes, okay, he's got this, I'm safe, I'm okay, and it'll all be taken care of. And I didn't have to worry, and I immediately fell asleep. I also think you can call on any angel. We have guardian angels who are with us all the time that are there watching over us. I think we can call on anyone. It's just that we need to remember to call on them and ask for their help, because they're not going to come in and violate our boundaries and do it for us without our permission. They need to have that clear statement that, yes, please, I need your help. Please come help me.
I'm looking over the chat, and one person wrote, for me, I'm not sure if we're saying names because we're recording, and I don't know at what point if we want to stop recording. But it says, for me, it's not letting people mow over the boundaries I think I've been clear about. totally can relate to that. I'm seeing a lot of hands. Yeah. I mean, like when we've said it, how many times do we have to say it? How many times do we have to show it? And they keep calling before 9 a.m. when, like, I've made this clear, do not call me before 9 a.m. or whatever it is, right? So does anybody have thoughts on how you handle that or want to elaborate on that? Do we want to keep recording or stop recording?
Yeah, I'm going to leave that up to you and Lori if we want to stop recording.
Okay. Before we stop, if we do stop, 'cause I don't care if we do or not. It's really up to the participants if they want to, if they're okay with it. Christy wrote, I saw a quote once, I can't remember the author, but it said, those that raged the hardest against your boundaries are the ones that benefited the most from you not having any. That is some deep truth, right? And that goes along with the question about what do you do when you lose a loved one because you said no?
Yeah.
That's really a hard, that's really a hard situation to be in. But the reality is, if you lose somebody because you have boundaries, what does that say about the relationship?
Mhm.
Can I talk on that for a second?
Yes.
So my experience with that, and let's keep recording for right now. If you don't want your name mentioned, go ahead and put it over in the chat and we'll just ask the question without putting it, because that won't be on the recording. I set a boundary with my daughter, and I had to walk away, and it was devastating. And it was the worst thing. No, it's one of the worst things that's ever happened in my life. However, by setting that boundary up and getting away from the toxicity of the situation, I was also able to figure out my part in it. And I think that's a big thing with boundaries that I have been noticing within myself, is that when I set those boundaries, it's really easy for me to walk away from those boundaries and say, okay, well, I had to set this because I had to protect myself. But then I've been pushing myself to go, okay, so what was your part in that? Because toxic situations are that way for a reason. And we do have a part in that, in my opinion. And so I got to spend some time going, okay, what was mine? And then we were able to rebuild. We're in the process of rebuilding our relationship in a totally different way because of that, and coming up with boundaries that work for both of us. So if somebody who truly loves you needs that boundary so that you both can go your own way and figure out how to heal on your own, it can really be beneficial in the long run, that at some point, maybe you get to come back. And if they don't come back to you, doesn't mean you love them any less, but I love a lot of people who I don't particularly like. And I'm okay with not spending time with them.
I agree, Ari. I think sometimes setting those boundaries, and especially with family, it gives everybody that chance to step back and look at their parts and their pieces of whatever the interaction was, and then decide, how am I going to respond to that? An example for me was my younger brother had difficulty with drugs and alcohol when he was younger. And he wasn't mean or anything, but I knew it was detrimental to he and his family. And I finally had to say to him, I love you very much, and you're not welcome at my home if you've been drinking, because I am worried about you and your health and your relationship with your wife and your children. And he respected that. And we were able, it was really hard for me because I really love my brother and I didn't want to hurt his feelings and I didn't want to alienate him. And at the same time, I couldn't continue to appear like I was supporting what he was doing. And it took a while, but it did smooth out. And he respected that boundary and then eventually did get into recovery. But it was probably one of the hardest boundaries I've ever set in my entire life.
There's a question. There's a question over here that says, I was raised Catholic and Archangel, I can't say it, Archangel Michael is often called upon. Is there a difference really with how it is used?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm not quite sure how the Catholics call upon Archangel Michael. To me, Archangel Michael is one of those wonderful archangels that is the protector, and also the sword of truth, and kind of cuts through the illusions and helps us to see clearly. And so I think really they're all the same. And I think we call on the angels with whatever our understanding is, and they come and help us in the best way that they can. Anybody else? Anybody grow up Catholic and have a different idea about Archangel Michael? Joe?
Elaine has her hand up.
Okay.
I was raised Catholic school also, and we read a lot of the Ezekiel. So it's universal. It's for everybody. And there's different practices, you know, like Saint Christopher, Saint Augustine, different saints that they use for certain things. But all, the way they taught us is that there was different angels and different the principalities, just different ranks. But I got the understanding that all of the archangels, guardian angels, the principalities, the ones that guarded were universal for everybody.
That's my impression as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Joe, if you wanted to speak, go ahead. Did you want us to stop the recording? Yes, stop the recording. Can we stop it, Harry?